Well, if you've ever really struggled with the Christmas tree prop in PRS or NRL22, you can thank your friends in Minnesota. From what I understand, here at this range, that's where this prop was designed. And so I'm going to try to get some more practice on it, as it is a home state prop. And we're going to see what I can do at 100 yards with the Nutrek 3-18 on this BCA 201 in the Kid chassis. Thank you to Kid and BCA for sending those out to the channel. Thank you to Nutrek, as well as Sunway Photo, Fab Defense, and there's a few more here I'll get to later. Let's go ahead and run a stage. Now I'm going to take you through some of the features of the Nutrek 3-18 by 50 first focal plane Coppertag, and a couple shout outs at the same time. I want to say thank you to Bear Creek Arsenal for sending out their 201. This 201 is a thick .92 stainless steel barrel. Really impressed with the action and the barrel performance, especially at the price point. And I reached out to Kid Innovations, who also sent out some stuff to the channel. They sent out a trigger as well as their chassis. Really appreciate that. Makes the build in so many different ways. Fab Defense set out this stock, and this stock is adjustable. I'm a tall guy, I'm 6'5", so it makes the eye relief work for me on the 1022 platform, which classically doesn't have a lot of rail space up here to throw on. Typically people have to use a cantilever. You notice that I'm able to get my Coppertag down nice and low to the barrel. I didn't have to use any riser or cantilever device. I was able to bring it down low because I have an appropriate stock and length of pull. So Fab Defense is huge for that. And then Sunway Photo, of course, provided the Arca rail attached underneath. This is their extra long version, and it fits the entirety of the Kid chassis, which is pretty long actually, and great for NRL22. Now let's take a look at those features. So the scope itself is not overly long. It's actually probably a little bit more compact than some 3-18s I've seen in the past. And the features are going to stand out. The texture of the devices are going to stand out as a design from other kinds. I like the feel of the texture on all of the dials and knurling and the knobs. It's actually pretty solid. And I'll start on the diopter end and walk forward with you. Starting on the diopter end, you do have a diopter adjustment, and it has a good grip to it. I would say the diopter, although it's smooth, it does have a fair bit of resistance. And if you're gonna have a non-locking diopter, that's actually a good thing. You don't want this to move on you when you have your flip-up scope covers, which this does come with. I removed for the purpose of the review. But the flip-up scope covers on a very light resistance diopter adjustment will actually move your setting, and you could be in the middle of a match, or like me, I borrow out my gear to other friends. We share rifles sometimes for matches if I'm getting them into the sport. They might move something around, and suddenly my diopter has been adjusted mid-match, and I'm gonna have some issues related to that. So this is actually a good level of resistance, and when it's cold out, it still moves, which here in Minnesota is a big deal. So reticle can get sharp. I don't have any issues with that, and it stays put for the most part unless I really put some force into it, and that's a good thing, not a bad thing. Moving on to the magnification assist lever is a pretty necessary component with this scope. I think going from 3 to 18 is a large range. It's not bad, and there's not a problem with that. But going from 3 to 18 power if you're in a hunting scenario or even a competition scenario and you need to bump it up quickly, it's nice to always have a little cattail or magnification assist lever on there. And this also has a lot of kind of an aggressive texture to it, so it's easy to grab onto and hold onto. The resistance for the magnification lever itself is reasonable. It's not a sticky one. It doesn't have slop in it, which is also something you might find in some cheap scopes. This is not a cheap scope, but sort of on the economy side, you start to see a little slop in the magnification assist or the magnification ring itself. And that's a problem because you could actually have slop in your components and it might not do exactly what it says it's doing. I've actually found numbers to not line up before because of a failure point in the magnification ring before. This one, however, is tight. It's moving with a fair bit of resistance, but it's not sloppy and it's not stiff. And there is a difference. It's kind of in the in-between area. I like it. I don't find myself always moving the magnification ring, especially if I'm in competition. I typically do leave it right around 12 power, somewhere in there for NRL 22. But if I want to quickly move it, then I can grab onto the assist lever here, and that takes some of the resistance down, or it gives me a little leverage, and the perceived force it takes to move it around is not too bad at all. It's pretty normal. I don't think it's gonna throw you off target, which is one of the main things. So 3 to 18 power. If you run a bolt gun, I don't believe this is gonna run into it, but if it did, all you would have to do is remove your assist that comes right off, and now you have no issues. So it's great for auto guns or bolt guns. Something that you don't see very often at this price point is capped windage. And I'm gonna go ahead and take the cap off, show you that you do have your 10th mil increment turrets underneath. I would say they're pretty tactile and clicky. They're a little bit more on the side that has some backlash in them, but not terrible, and they're audible, and it's very tangible. I can feel and hear them, and that's all I really need when it comes to something in this price point. It doesn't have to be, a very dry turret. It doesn't need to be that way, but as long as they track true, and I can hear them and feel them. Sometimes in the wintertime, I'm using gloves in a competition, and when you have gloves on, you need to be able to feel it if you can't hear it. There's other people shooting around you. You might have hearing protection on, so you need to still be able to feel it if you did 1 click or 2 clicks. And then additionally, another component that's a big deal is you need the numbers, the numerical indicators, to line up on the witness mark. And the witness mark on this one bears true. I find that the 10th mil clicks are right on the line. And that's not something you always find in the budget price point. A lot of times the budget optics have a witness line, but your turrets might not be milled right, they might not be painted right, and you'll see kind of an error, or it might line up in the middle of between 2 clicks, and you don't know if you're exactly on 2.3 or 2.4. It can be very frustrating. This one, however, does not have that issue. As I previously mentioned, this has 10 mils per revolution. And that's the way I like to see it done. 10 mils is a very easy number for us to work with. We're Americans, and in our minds, 10 is an easy number to rationalize when you're looking at your reticle, especially if your reticle has 10 mils of holdover. It's easy to quickly adjust and see what number you're on. Something important that on the windage as well as the elevation, the markings do have a rise to the 0.5 indicator, which is important if you're trying to designate, am I on 0.5 or 0.6 in the middle of a competition? If you have all the same size 10th mil indicators, it's very hard to tell which one you're on if you're not really good or comfortable with the scope. So just having that little bit of a rise painted in on the 0.5 indicator gives you a reference point when you're in the middle of your tenths. The scope can be reset to 0. You can slip the scales, and also it has a 0 stop, which is a mechanical 0 stop. Functions well. It's pretty much the standard in the industry, and at this price point, it is something you would expect to see. Now moving on to the illumination. The illumination is going to be dusk capable or early morning capable. I wouldn't say daylight bright, but a lot of times for a scope, that's just not necessary. It's more of a red dot application. With this one, I found it to be really capable and competent for dusk And one thing they did really well is they have off in between with 6 settings. Now you want to have off in between so you can rapidly adjust. I typically leave mine right in between 6 and 1. I leave it on an off setting right there. So if I need very, very low illumination when it's very dark out, or if I need the brightest illumination, I can quickly choose between the two. And I like having off in between. Your battery compartment does not accidentally loosen and move off. I found that on some budget scopes in the past where it just kind of slides off every time you use your illumination. That's frustrating. I didn't find that here. Then you have your parallax wheel. Now the parallax wheel on this model does actually have some numbers on it, and reference points are fine, but you have to understand that numbers are not always going to be calibrated. I didn't find the numbers to match on this exactly for my eye, and that doesn't matter to me. It's not a big deal because I'm going to adjust the parallax knob while I'm looking through the glass at my target. And especially if I'm in competition, it's just gonna be a quick adjustment. I'm gonna take my shots and move on to the next target and next distance. I'm not gonna be settling down and looking at my parallax knob repeatedly. That's a waste of time in competition. So sometimes it's nice to have reference numbers on there, but a lot of times it's just not necessary. So if it matches for your eye, great. For my eye, it didn't. Parallax on this knob goes down from a minimum of a little under 10 yards up to infinity, and you have reference points at multiple distance in between. The resistance and the tension for the parallax knob is again appropriate. It's not going to move under recoil. It's not a sloppy parallax knob. And you don't want something to be too loose, especially with parallax. That can actually mean that you have tolerance issues inside. And if it's ever really, really tough or too hard to move, that could be an indicator that you tightened your scope rings, primarily this scope ring, too much, and it's causing a crunch on the inner components. So just something to pay attention to when you're setting up your scope and feeling out the adjustment knob. But this one for the parallax moves pretty smoothly, and I found it functioned very well. It cured parallax, and I found that I could actually get a decent depth of field when I was running it back and forth. When it comes to a 3-18 by 50, I think it's a very cross-platform friendly magnification range and scope body type, especially if they run a 30mm tube. It keeps a little bit lighter. You still have plenty of elevation, and with a competent reticle, you can take them incredibly far. I have seen people shoot at a mile with 3-18s before, and I find that this model is competent for auto guns, ARs, as well as bolt actions. I think the 30mm tube helps cut down some of that weight while retaining some of the awesome features like exposed turrets and a very functional, practical reticle. You're gonna see this does come with a scope shade or a sunshade attachment. I've decided to throw mine in. I found that in recent days, a lot of scope companies and manufacturers are trying to save money by not throwing them in. It's a nice feature to get thrown in, especially at this price point, and I appreciate this one. It's not huge, it's not overly long, it does the trick, and I can still use my included flip-up cap. What I have right now is my phone is actually what I'm recording with. That's why the audio is a little goofy right now, and it's sitting in a side shot scope cam mount. And I'm on the optic, this 3-18 at 50 yards. I'm gonna flip it around so you can see into the scope, and I'm gonna try to shoot a little bit of KYL and probably some paper at 55-ish yards. It is very, very windy. I'm gonna use some Normatec ammo, which isn't match ammo, but it shoots pretty all right. And we'll see what kind of performance you can get out of this, and hopefully we can start talking about the reticle, because I think the reticle is one of the places this optic does shine. All right, let's go ahead and get her zeroed. Some paper there at 50 yards, and the first ammo was no bueno, so I'm gonna switch over to Aguila, see how it does. Okay, I can go ahead and make a correction now. So obviously I need a windage correction. Looks like about a 1/2 mil. Oops, wrong way. That's probably the aggregate of the group. And that put us right in the center there. It measured the same for corrections in actual clicks as it did with the reticle, so that looks like it was true enough for that little bit of dialing here. Let's go ahead and throw a few more. It is very, very windy, so normally it wouldn't be zeroing with just those few shots. Looks like I'm going to be fighting wind on this one back and forth, but it is tracking over and up and down sufficiently, and I don't think I'd have problems with that if it weren't so darn windy. 14 mile an hour crosswinds is just too much to be reliable for windage calculation, but I did see elevation was consistent and true through the range so far. Next on 18 power, let's give it a try on the KYL. Even in the wind, I should be able to get a few of these with bulk ammo. Here we go, 18 power at 55 yards. Now that mirage is pretty strong. That's not the glass clarity, it's actually the mirage you're probably dealing with. And empty. I still managed to get a few of them in the wind. Not terribly good. It's actually pretty bad for me at this distance, but with the reticle, I was able to contrast really well. I like the big center dot. Reticle subtensions are good. It's easy to use, and the glass clarity is actually good as long as I don't fight too much mirage. Let me just focus that in a little bit more clear for you there. Cameras can't generally focus on the target and the reticle equally well. At least phone cameras can't, but just to give you a little bit more perception of what it's like on those smaller KYL targets. Very doable, even though a couple of them have been beat up somewhat and hit quite a few times. You can see how the dot still can't contrast in the gray or red portions. Looking at illumination, it is not going to be daylight bright, although it's easier for me to see with the naked eye than it is for you right now. I'll wait till there's a lower light setting and you'll be able to see at dusk it is sufficient. It's just going to be that middle quadrant there, which is great for hunting and closer range targets especially. It's not going to obstruct field of view with lots of illumination and brightness or bleed over. I kind of like that for a 3 to 18 in particular. Some of you who shoot long range might like illumination down at least the center post of the stadia, but for this works for me. Let's try one more time on 18 power on a KYL. See if the wind is a little easier to work with. Looks like it's almost dying off. Okay, I'll go for it here. This is a 6-pound trigger, by the way. And a jam. Clear the malfunction. Sorry about that. Let's go back. There it is. Kind of difficult in this wind. That's about 14 mile an hour winds, even at 55 yards. It's going to push the bullet around a little bit, but the reticle has plenty of room to breathe. It allows me to favor sides of the target. As you can see here, I can go pretty much in there anywhere, and I'm not obstructing because of the center dot and the way that the quadrant is laid out for the first mil and half mil portions. It allows me a lot of practical holdovers, and then I do have negative hold if I need to mill in, I don't know, maybe a longer range scenario. I can do some milling that way. The center dot is the same size as some of the wind holds, I believe. I don't know, those are pretty big. Maybe I should double check that. But they don't seem to obstruct anything for me, and they contrast really nicely. On 3 to 18s, I just generally like bigger subtensions. Let's try some holdovers at 220. Let's go for the smaller target and see. So obviously standard deviation isn't amazing on that, and I'm at the bottom of the glass as far as you're looking right there, but not terrible. I would actually say it's pretty usable and comfortable for me. My image is going to be way clearer than what the phone can provide, much more clear than what their phone can provide, but I would say it was probably competitive for the $300 and $400 optics price point for image. And then I do like that reticle. I think I kind of prefer this reticle over some other options in the price point, or in that vicinity at least. At 220, by the way, standard deviation wasn't great on this bulk box ammo, but that's not a huge target. That's actually a relatively small target in this wind. Well, actually, I kind of like this scope. Nutrek is doing interesting things. I'm going to show you a little more in a second. Let's get out of the sun so you can actually see. I like the scope. I like the optic. It's definitely a budget optic. This isn't going to be something to replace your March or your Zeiss, and nobody thinks it is. But it is a pretty good scope in the way that the reticle functions exactly how it should. Subtension values are right where they ought to be. They're true. They match up with a mil grid down there. I think the weight of the scope isn't bad. It's fairly lightweight. 3 to 18 is a very functional range for just about everything. Hunting and competition both actually seem really good. And I'm kind of on a 3 to 18 kick right now, so I'm looking at a lot of them and some that are about to come to market. And this has a couple things on some of those models out there, like it has a nearer parallax than many models do. That's cool. It does have illumination, and it has the illumination style that I like personally, which matters. It does have a capped windage. Capped windage isn't something you're going to see in every model of 3 to 18 out there. A lot of the 3 to 18s actually have an exposed turret there as well. I just don't need that on a 3 to 18. The dials and knobs are all functional in the way they should be. Like the magnification throw isn't extra tough or resistant to move, even in the cold. It's actually quite cold out right now. It's not overly tough. It does have a little cattail on there, a little nub, so you can throw it smoother, easier. The 3 power is usable, although the iBox isn't perfect on 18 power or 3 power. It's pretty darn good. And I think it's easier to make a good 3 to 18 than it is something with a higher ratio for a rector tube or a rector. And so I would say this is a great range so far for the glass that I'm seeing. It seems to support the reticle really well, and the full range of travel that I have used, which I've only used about 20 mils to go out pretty far over there. But within the 20 mils, the glass was decent. It was pretty good for the price point, and I like the reticle better than a lot of others, again, because the reticle is a little bit thicker, the center dot just a little bit more bold and contrasty, and the price point is efficient. This is darn near affordable for everybody. I don't know anybody who's getting into shooting who couldn't save up enough to get something like this. And they have other optics. That's one thing that's cool about Nutrek. Let me walk you over now that we're done with this. I'm pretty much giving the thumbs up. I like it. The turrets feel a little bit mushy to me. They're a little bit mushy, but my friend Alex over at Epic Arms did a tracking test. He kind of proved that the tracking reliability on his model was good, and it looks like my tracking is also good, although I did not do a box test officially. I'm going to go with Alex. I do trust him quite a bit. And it looks like, overall this is a trustworthy optic. They have a lot of other branded optics. Let's go ahead and take a look at some of their binos. By Enjo Sports, this is one of their brands called Nutrek. And these are some binoculars that they make called the Quest 10 by 42s. I would do an unboxing for you, but I think I'll just put this aside and tell you about the product. Inside, you're going to find your lens cleaning cloth and a manual. Don't get rid of those. Those are usually important, especially if you've never set up something like a diopter, which I'm going to tell you about later. Those are important pieces, but I want to tell you about what's inside of this. So you do get a carrying case. It's a padded carrying case. You could either belt carry or neck carry. It does have a slider on it. for adjusting and carrying for different lengths of people. I'm gonna put that aside because you're probably more interested in the binos. The binos themselves do have a neck lanyard. I've already been using mine quite a bit, and I really like this neck lanyard. I've already attached it. It is a neoprene style, which is very important. Whether you're in cold weather or warm weather, these are typically the best materials to use because it's comfortable. If you're kind of warm and sweaty down in the south in the summer, carrying around binoculars, you want, even with a 10-by, you want a nice padded neck lanyard like this, and it's also not gonna make you sweat. It's not gonna be itchy like a Cordura fabric would. These are very comfortable, and it seems to be put together pretty well. So I like the neck lanyard. Another thing about the lanyard, the carry strap, is the fact that it does connect to your next feature here, which are your rubberized caps, your lens caps. These can lace through, and one of the features you have on the caps is a dual position for threading through. A good pair of binoculars is going to have integral strap lugs built into the body of the binoculars, which this does, again, on both sides. So you can keep everything together, and I don't know about you, but when I have a pair of lens covers that are not attached, I tend to lose them a lot, or I put them in a pocket, I set them down somewhere, and then they're gone. I like having them attached to the lanyard itself. I find that to be the most reliable way to actually use a lanyard in collaboration with your covers. On the other end, you can see that there are some flip down covers, which is the right orientation. You want them to flip down and out of the way. These are also rubberized. They do come off if you find that you need to take them off and you want to go lighter weight or they're just in the way for whatever reason. One thing I like about this style of cover though is that they are clip in. They actually clip into the body of the binoculars. And so instead of clipping on and over, sometimes that can be a little difficult on polymer or magnesium body binocular barrels. They just don't want to clip on that well when they're clip overs unless it's a harder plastic. So these being a softer rubber actually works out really well because they can clip in and they actually do have a little bit of a tab to grab the inside of the barrel on the objective lens. Another really important feature on binoculars is the ability to stabilize them with a tripod or a monopod of some sort. And this has a tripod adapter socket. All you need to do is thread out the plastic thread protector. And when that comes out, it's going to reveal your 1/4 inch typical thread. For almost every binocular socket I've seen, it's going to fit right into that. And that's awesome because it allows you to have a higher stability factor on something like a pair of 10X's that you see here. Going on a tripod, if you're birding or if you're spotting at a competition, is pretty necessary for a stability factor, especially at closer distances. And that will adapt onto just about all of them that I've ever seen. Going to the other side, now you have your actual focus wheel. And this is very, very important. It's important to know about because you're going to use that as well as your diopter to get these set up for your eye at whatever you're looking at. I'll talk more about that feature in a later part of the video when we're actually outside trying it out. I'm going to show you how I set up the diopter and focus wheel and how they navigate and work. But I would tell you right now, I'm really happy with the resistance level that I find in the focus wheel. If a focus wheel is too smooth or too light going back and forth, it can be easily bumped and it can just be frustrating. Sometimes you'll find that a really loose focus wheel could actually even just be so hypersensitive that you can't seem to get the focus right where you want it to be. But a proper resistance on a focus wheel like this will give you the ability to fine-tune your focus to a very, very high level. And I'm happy to see an appropriate level of resistance on this pair of binoculars. Lastly, again, for those of you with interpupillary distance issues, if you wear glasses, it's going to be very important to set up your diopter with the standoff for the eye cups here. You need to look at your manual to understand that, but you're going to start with them all the way together and use the hinge to find the appropriate distance and then leave it right there, setting it up for your eye. I will tell you that when it comes to hinges for binoculars, it's another area where if there's not enough resistance, they tend to fold too easily. And it can be really frustrating to get a pair of binoculars to set right where they want to be or where they need to be to keep them accurate for your eyes and comfortable so you're not fighting the lenses or fighting the image. And I find that this level of resistance is actually very good. This is up there with some of the more expensive binoculars. For a pair that's under $600, I'm pretty happy with the features I found so far. So just for an example, I'm going to hold up my camera very briefly and talk about this. You can see the detail in the shadow of my footprints in the snow there, about 70 yards away. And it's a significant magnification, which is good. And the detail in contrast is still great, which when you're shooting into snow, which is something I deal with all the time, you need to be able to have sufficient detail and contrast against that white snow. When your bullets are impacting or you're missing your target, you're going to need to see a little bit of fluff, and sometimes the snow is hard and you need to see an entrance hole into the snow to know where you missed by. And I think these are going to provide a sufficient amount of light as well as color fidelity, as I already mentioned, and contrast. I'm actually just really happy with their overall footprint and then the image that it's providing here. Just holding my camera up again, cameras will never do justice. In my eye, it's actually much clearer and brighter too. But I'm happy to say these are a good value for anybody who's looking to pair up a good optic with a good pair of binoculars for competition shooting or hunting. I need to wrap up this video, and inevitably people are going to ask, is this better than that? Is this better than that? And you know what? I need to set everything up to make judgment calls like that. Is it pretty good? Yes, it's pretty good. I think it's a decent performing optic. It's not going to be my open class setup by any means. This is very much so a base class optic, and they're not trying to fool anybody into thinking this is an open class style optic or at that premium level. But for the budget-minded person who needs like a good 3-18, maybe for long-range hunting, that's absolutely something I could see with this, or long-range shooting in general. Small game hunting, you do have that low power with a near parallax, even air gun use of some degree, PCPs, and 22. I can see this fitting everything. That's the great thing about 3-18 as a range, and that's why I'm kind of on a 3-18 kick right now, is it does so much so well. If you need a bigger, heavier optic for a regular PRS rig, they have other options that I'll probably try out soon and see what I think about those. It does hold some promise. I feel pretty optimistic about the brand. One thing you should know is they have a huge number of SKUs. When I was on their website, I couldn't believe how much they have. When I was just at SHOT Show recently, I looked through to see what else they have, and I kind of got a feel that this company is going to be around for the long haul. They have invested a lot of money, a lot of product development, and they do have stuff that's worth purchasing. It's not junk. It's not bottom of the barrel junk. It is absolutely usable, functional, probably better than average optics, actually. So I think they're going to be around for the long haul. I really like their binoculars. If I could only choose one, I'm probably going towards the binoculars. But the scope, you will continue to see on the channel. I'll try it out for a few more things. Maybe I'll run it in a couple NRL 22 competitions on a different rifle, I think, or with a better trigger again on this one. I'll reach back out to Kid and see if I can get another trigger for this guy. But if you want to see more from Nutrek, or there's something very specific that you want me to review so that you don't have to take the risk on your own, let me know down in the comments. I'm going to talk to them again and see what else they'll send out to the channel for a review. Right now, though, if you need a good 10X and a 3-18 and you have around $1,000, you can get both of these and be set up for most competitions, most styles of hunting. And I think they're going to be above average in performance, especially this one. Thanks to Nutrek and everybody else who sent out stuff to the channel so I could shoot these videos. If you like this video, you can go ahead and hit the thumbs up. It really would help a lot. Maybe subscribe to my channel and leave a comment down below. And if you really hated it, I actually would really appreciate it if you would comment down below what you hated and what I could do better, because I'm trying to improve the channel and I would like to make it more useful for everyone who watches. Thanks, guys. I'll see you in the next one.